All right, everybody. So, what we're going to look at today is how FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and his New Deal programs attempted to alleviate the effects of the Great Depression. So, hopefully, you've done some of the work looking at sort of the failures of the stock market, the collapse of the banks, and really the impact on day to day people. And we sort of had to come to an understanding of what was the government going to do to try and help people. Some people didn't think we should do anything. Some people thought we should basically nationalize everything, have the government take care of everything. And what you're going to see throughout the 1930s is a struggle between these sort of ideas. So, we're going to look at the different presidents and how they chose to respond to this Great Depression. So, when the Great Depression begins, the president of the United States is this guy named Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover is kind of your traditional American dream success story. Born into poverty, kind of works his way up, puts himself through college, and he sort of, with that idea, has a mentality that if he could do it, anybody could do it. And one of the big impediments to people oftentimes was government. Now, there's a misunderstanding that he didn't do anything. That's not true. But he was sort of a man of his time, and he believed that the way to get the American economy moving was to try and get consumers to spend more money. Now, if we were in class, I would ask, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is a lot of people don't have any money. So if you don't have money, you really can't spend. Now, what he truly believed, though, is that local communities were in a better spot to help its citizens. The federal government in Washington would have a really hard time, helping individuals out in Biloxi, Mississippi, or Sioux Falls, Iowa, or, any of those towns. So he was hoping the local communities would help, whether through charity or local government, stuff like that. He truly believed in little government interference. He thought the federal government was too big, too slow, and would not impact people enough. So what he thought is that if you gave money to businesses, if you cut their taxes, eventually people will get it. And later on in the 1980s, really, we referred to this as trickle-down economics. Give business incentive, they hire people, those people have money, and that's the way to get the economy working again. On the other hand, you have this guy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, sort of the opposite of Herbert Hoover, born into wealth, but he was a man who had been involved in government for a long time, and he really truly thought that the government was the only mechanism to sort of help people through this economic depression. It was in some ways an unprecedented scenario. We've gone through depressions before, but this one was so deep and seemed to hurt people so badly that he believed that people couldn't wait for this trickle down of money. So what he promises are three major things, what we call relief, recovery, and reform. And that really makes up what becomes known as the New Deal. In his mind, the old deal, the way things used to be done, was rotten. It didn't work. The New Deal was going to help people. So if you look at the 1932 presidential election, FDR wins all of the states in blue, and Herbert Hoover wins all of the states in red. He wins Delaware, he wins Pennsylvania, and not much else. America is ready for a change. So if you look at his three major ideas, you can sort of think of it in terms of, you get sick, right? The first thing you want is relief. So the American economy was sick. You have to treat those symptoms. I have a fever. I want that fever to go away, so I take Tylenol. Am I better? No, but I feel a little bit better. So this was sort of the immediate action to halt the deterioration of the US economy. The first thing, bank holidays. Close the banks. People can't take their money out. Banks can't fail if they're not open. And the other thing he wanted to do was jobs. Give people jobs. We need roads. Build roads. The government will give you a check. Now, this doesn't fix anything, but it sort of stops the bleeding. Okay, it treats the fever. It kind of gets you moving. It gets you from doing nothing to at least doing something. Now, if we look at recovery, that's sort of the next step. You have the flu, so you take a Tylenol. Your fever starts to come down. But what you need to do is you need to start to recover. You need to rest. You need to drink a lot of fluids. You need to get yourself better. And that's sort of what the New Deal was going to try to do. Let's permanently help people. Let's come up with programs that fix things that were wrong, right? That will increase confidence in the institutions. People didn't want to put their money in banks. They were afraid they were going to fail. People didn't want to put their money in the stock market. They thought they would lose money. Well, we need those two things. The big drivers of the U.S. economy are business. and investment and loans. We need those things. That's what the banks, that's what the stock market provides. So if people aren't putting their money in these institutions, things will not get better. And finally, reform, right? You need to not do the things that got you in this situation. Permanent changes. So if you got the flu this year, well, maybe next year you're going to get a flu shot. You want to avoid that. So these are going to be permanent changes to avoid depression and ensure citizens against these big economic disasters. Now, what we saw during the Great Depression, there were a lot of problems that caused it. You had overspending, you had over credit, too much credit. That's not a word. Over credit's not a word. But you had too much credit. You had people buying on margin. You had people investing in the stock market who had no business doing that. The stock market crashed. Why? Because people started to sell. We had panic. What happened to the banks? They closed. They shut down because people were pulling their money out. What happened to unemployment? It went up because people weren't working. And what happened to spending? Spending went down. People were worried that they were running out of money. They didn't know when their next paycheck was going to come, so they were not spending. So what you guys are going to work on is something called this alphabet soup program. Now ignore what it says here about what module it's in. Obviously, it's not there. But what FDR believed is this quote: "It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something." So what you guys are going to work on is you're going to look at some of these programs that he kind of instituted. He worked with Congress to push through and see what you get from that.